Okay, so we're ready to mark up the tenon section. So I'm going to lay this over and I'm going to leave three millimeters. Okay, so I'm going to leave about 3 millimeters at the top there. Get my square on this side, gently butt that up, take that one away, and then pinching the square nice and tight up against the timber, just lightly across once, twice, and 3 times. Okay, so I've got my stock of my timber, stock of my square on my reference edge as always. Okay, and I'm just going to mark that all the way around. Coming back this way, so from my reference face. Okay, wonderful. So I've got my shoulder line all the way around there. And then what I'm going to do is, again, finding my reference face, okay, get those 2 pins. So this is still set from when we did our marking out for our mortise section, okay, so it's not moved. And so reference face on here, just tip the points there and then gently push away, and then again. Okay, so you need to do quite light scores to start with, or those points will just press in and follow the grain. Okay, and then if you can pop this in the vise if you want to make it a bit more stable across the top. In fact, I'm going to do that for the end grain. Okay, so end grain, if you imagine all those straws coming up vertically, as you push across they're all going to want to flick away from you, so just stabilising your timber so you can get some control. Okay, so that took me, what, 5 passes just to get that nicely neat line established. And then again, same face. Oops, there goes my clamp. So just pivot the points into the timber. Oh, there we go. Okay, so just stock up against here, pivot those points so they touch the timber, and scribe down. Okay, so the neater and the more care you take of your marking out, the better the quality of your work you'll produce. Accurate marking out is the starting point for everything. Okay, so I'm just going to darken those marks just so you can see them a bit easier. Whoops. Okay, so on this one, it's quite important to mark our waist, okay, because it's really easy to cut them the wrong way round. And, you know, when you're concentrating and you've got lots of things you're thinking about, it's quite easy just to cut out the wrong piece. So on this one, we want to keep the centre section because that's going to fit in here, and we're going to remove these outside pieces. So I'm just going to scribble on my waist here. So it's just that visual reminder of what we're actually doing. Okay, so I've done one saw cut over this side here, which really annoyingly my camera stopped filming, so here we go for take 2. So I'm just going to use my thumb again as a sort of guide for the saw plate, pinching up on there, resting my finger for a bit of stability, and just line that up using the round of your thumb to keep the saw there. So nice light grip on the saw, finger pointing down, get your body out of the way so your arm can move freely, like imagine you're playing pool or snooker, so you want to deliver that cue through in a nice straight line. So take the weight of the saw and I've tilted this timber so I can see this line here and this line here. So it gives me a better visual reference to try and keep my saw tracking nice and plumb. And it also helps because we're not trying to cut across such a large amount of end grain. Okay, and it's a bit easier to start the saw. So thumb on there, and let's just really gently push away. Okay, sighting down. I'm just lowering my hand a bit to establish this cut down here. And then evening out the saw a little bit to track across the line going away from me. So I'm about, oops, tighten that up, about 1/2 millimetre away from that line. Okay, so nice and softly with the saw. Keep it relaxed. Okay, just check on what you're doing. I am coming a little bit close to my line there. So I'm just going to even this saw up. Lift my hand back a little bit. Track across to that corner. And lower down a little bit more. Being really careful not to saw below my baseline. Okay, so keep an eye on that baseline. And then even up the saw nice and horizontal. Try and join up those two marks. I'll just pencil in that baseline so you can see where it is. Oops. Okay. So go as close as you can, as closest to your lines as you're confident. I'll just finish off that one right there. Okay, so I'm going to turn the timber around and again have it pointing away from me. Pencil in this baseline too. Okay, so thumb on again, just trying to line up the saw with that cut that's just come across the top here. Okay, so I'm going to pinch my 2 fingers and use those as a guide for the saw. So pinch them together and kind of use the knuckles as a guide for the saw. And again, really gently. It doesn't take long before you fall into that saw cut, and then I can track down this line. Just going to move that up a little bit. My hand is hitting the bench. Okay, so body out of the way when you're sawing, nice and relaxed. And what we're trying to do is meet this corner with this line down here. Okay, at a diagonal like that with our saw. Okay, so I've cut down all sides now, so that's going to leave me with a point coming up into the middle because we've cut an angle across here and cut an angle across here, so we're going to be left with that little triangle of material. So I'm just going to put vertically in the vise, drop the saw in, and cut down and cut away that little peak in the middle. Getting as close to the baseline as you're confident, keeping an eye on both sides. Okay, yeah, and then the second one. Whoops. Okay, so we're going to come across and cut these bits away shortly. Right, so I've got my piece of timber laid in my vise a long ways now, so I'm just going to talk you through a small trick, you might call it, that you can do if you are struggling to get those saw cuts nice and plumb and even, which just takes a bit of practice. I'm going to come back into my scalpel line, slide the square up. Okay, so from my reference face again, slide that up, lean the scalpel over slightly, and I'm going to do quite a deep score across there, and again and again. Okay, and then I'm going to do that on these shoulders as well. So knife, drop your knife into that divot. But I'm only going to come from here, from this midway point. We don't need to score across the middle of the tenon because that's going to be staying. We don't want to see that. So this outside third, I'm just going to reinforce the scalpel mark and this one. Okay. I'm going to go all the way around and do that. Okay, so just reinforce and deepen those scalpel lines, and then what that allows us to do is come back with a chisel and just at a quite a low angle, just wiggle in, as we did before, just wheedle out that little triangle of material, and again. Okay, so I've got a really nice crisp line that my scalpel's left me, and a small V shape coming down into it, which really helps and enables the saw to catch and sit right up on that line. So if you drag along, it will catch on there. So, and that little V shape will help your saw sit at a nice parallel line, and all you got to worry about is cutting down. Okay, so I would err on the side of caution and cut from here in this direction. Okay, coming across, so we don't cut into the shoulder we want to keep. Okay, or if you want to go for it and try and just drop straight down, you can do. You could also come back in and do these edges as well. Okay, so you just get that little triangle of material pop out. Okay, see if you can see that up close, that little triangle. So I'm just going to drop my saw in that V shape. You don't have to do this, but it is an option. It can work really well. When you get used to it, it can save you a lot of time chiseling back. So have a go. Drop that in there. So I'm going to use 2 fingers and the knuckle of these 2 fingers to keep the saw in place and gently push away. Okay, so I'm slightly angling into my waist. Keeping an eye on there, you don't want to cut into your tenon that you want to keep. And there we go, it's free. And the same the other side. And into that little knife mark, fingers again, knuckles as a little guide, and gently push it. And once you establish, you can move your fingers back. And again, keeping your body out of the way. Being careful not to saw into your bench top. Unless you've got a bench top you're not worried about, of course. Okay, and that one just needs to come back in a little bit more. Didn't quite go deep enough. There we go. So another good thing about that method of scoring that knife line nice and deeply is, if you can see on there, my shoulders are now pointing upwards slightly. So if we try to put that into our tenon, we're going to have a gap on the outsides. But we know that the outside of the tenon here, this shoulder, is where we want it to be because we've scored it with that knife fall. So what we can do is put it back in the vise. And we're pretty confident that this outside line is where we want it to be. So we're not going to touch that. All I'm going to do is come in about 1 millimetre on here, okay, and then pare away that rise. So I don't need to touch that outside surface, the very outside. It's where we need it to be. Okay, so I'm just going to come back in and then using half, a third to half, we should be able to rest that right on the outside. I don't know if you can see actually, but on here you can see right on the edge, you can see where the scalpel scored that timber already. There's a very small line, I don't know, about a quarter 1/4 mil, something like that, where it's just gone down and already severed those fibres. You can just make it out on the shoulders. So that is a great place to put your chisel, because we know this is nice and even where we want it to be. We can just put our chisel and then focus at flattening this out. So from the 1/4 mil back into the centre. So it's quite a good method to have a go at. So I'm just resting on that little bit of fibre I can see and trying to push in nice and horizontal, keeping an eye on the shoulder line here as well. That's lovely. Moving along a little bit more. Okay, can I do it this way so you can see? So I'm going to be pushing against the wrong way here, so I've just tipped it that way so hopefully you can see. Okay, so just resting your chisel just inside the edge, pushing forward. And once you've got a little bit established here, that helps guide the rest of your chisel as you're doing the rest of your work. Okay, so just inside, just leaving this nice edge that we cut with the scalpel earlier. Leave it alone, we don't need to do anything with that. There we go. Got a bit of a bump there, so I'm just going to come down this way. Okay, so just have a look on here as well. That looks nice and square to me. Pretty square. Just have a look. So I'm just looking at this side for the minute. It looks like it's still raising up ever so slightly, just from 1/3 or 2/3 to the back third. So I'm just going to have a little bit more adjustment there. So I'm going to start with my chisel about halfway in now, because I don't need to touch this front edge. That edge is good. I'm just getting away, paring away that slight slope upwards towards the face of the tenon. And tissue paper is all I'm taking. Let's have another look. That's looking spot on. Okay, so I'm just looking at this little angle again on there. So if you line that up, you can see, can you see? Look. You see on this side, it's just rising up in towards the shoulder. Okay, so I'm just gonna focus on this one now. Leaving the outside, as I've said, we're happy with that. So starting, leaving 1/3 on the outside and pushing inwards. Okay, usually you'd have your timber rotated. I'm just doing this so you can see. Obviously it would normally that way, so you're pushing against the bench, not into the gap of your vise. Okay, just paring that high slope off and leaving the outside edge. Cool. So I've just got a little bit of a bump left in this corner from the saw cut, so I'm just going to just gently sever those downwards, come back in and pop them off. A little bit more. Okay, let's have a look and see how we did. So I can still see it's a little bit high just on this edge, sloping back up in case there's a little bit more to do there. But that side's looking good. So a little bit more over here. Looking good. The pencil, the black pen has absorbed into the grain a little bit, so it's making it, throwing it out a little bit, but that looks good to my eye. Actually, a little bit more. Yeah, let's see how that goes. Excellent. So another good option you've got here is to try shoulder plane. Okay, so on this one, the blade comes right out to the edges, and we'll talk a bit more about setting up a shoulder plane. But if you do have one, if you've used one before, they're really good for coming in. Okay, and because the blade comes right out to the edge, you can get right up into your corner and just gently keep paring away. This one's a little big. You can get some shorter ones which are a little bit wider, a bit stumpier, which might be good. Okay, but again, a shoulder plane is another really good option just for cleaning up these faces of your tenon. Okay, so yep, so you've got your chisel option, your router plane option, okay, shoulder plane option as well. I'm going to go with the router plane because I like them, really. So making sure you keep a lot of pressure down on this hand. You don't want to start tipping. We're going to taper the tenon. So loosen, quarter turn down, and just very small light passes. We don't want to push out any of this grain we've worked so hard to keep nice and clean. Coming back from this direction as well, just to keep that edge good. And the end grain as well. So I'm pivoting in at a bit of an angle, coming across this end grain. So I don't want to push it off. So coming across, it's pushing inward slightly. So I'm going to come across on this half from this direction, and then across on this half from this direction. Just going to tackle that bit with a chisel because it's lifting up quite considerably and we don't want that. So I'm just going to remove that. So just taking a little bit too much off there and it's raised up more than I want. So that runs the risk of my tenon being a little bit small. I think we might just be okay. But you do need to take it really nice and slow. And there we go, just finishing that off. Okay, so ideally what you would do is do the same on both sides. So adjust this one a little bit, turn it over. So we're centered at the moment, we want to keep it centered. Okay, so I'm going to flip that over and then work this side down a bit. There's nothing coming off there. A little bit on this corner. So we're good. Just keep working it down. So I'm just checking the fit. Okay, so I'm almost down to that line. So before I go too far, I'm just checking. And that is actually just fitting in our tight side that we did, our front face. So I'm not going to push that all the way in. I'm going to come back to my wider face here, the first one we did. Check the face and edge marks are the right way up. Okay. And go. Ooh. Let's see if we can knock that together. Yeah. Okay. That's not too bad. Okay, so we've got nice shoulder line across there. No gaps under there. That's the black pencil line, you can see. There is a tiny little gap here. Which might be just a bit of fluff right in that corner. But we're nice and flush. Okay, there's no step off. So that means our marking that we did is nice and accurate. So we mark this from the same face. So all our lines and guidelines and saw cuts should all line up from the same face. If they don't, you'll end up with a little step over here, which isn't ideal because you have to plane a lot of material away and make the back of this one smaller. So yep, I'm pretty happy with that. So these are quite tricky to do. Notoriously difficult to get a nice clean edge around here. So I'm just going to plane this off and have a look and see how we did. But I'm pretty happy with that. Nice, let's just check actually while we're here. Check we're square in there. Yep. Yep, okay, so again, that's good accurate marking out with these lines on here. One thing to point out is actually, I didn't really need these face lines that I drew on the front or scratched onto the front. So they're going to be quite difficult to remove. So if this was the leg of a chair or something like that and your rail coming across, this would be quite difficult to sand out. So just have a little think about where you need lines and where you don't. And yeah, good luck with it. There we go. Not too shabby.